you have to start separating your friends from your employees. Right?
Yeah.
You can't still be friends with everybody and be their. And I think that was the hardest lesson for me, was becoming a supervisor, because they don't teach you that in nursing school.
I actually held the record for the youngest nursing home administrator in the state of Massachusetts. I'm sure it's broken by now. And so I think I was 23 when I was licensed and ran my first nursing home.
Ready to shatter the status quo and unleash your leadership potential? Sick of the same old tired leadership advice? Well, get ready to disrupt your thinking and transform your leadership skills. Welcome to Sound Leadership with DJ, the podcast that's about to challenge everything you thought you knew about leadership. Join DJ as he dives into the trenches with industry trailblazers, exploring the real issues leaders face today. From innovative strategies to proven techniques, we'll uncover the secrets to taking your leadership from good to great. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and equipped to conquer new heights. Join the movement and let's redefine leadership together. This is Sound Leadership with DJ. Leadership redefined.
Welcome back to Sound Leadership with DJ, the podcast dedicated to exploring the essence of leadership. Here, we connect you with visionary thinkers and trailblazers who are shaping the future of long-term care and senior living. In this episode, it is no different. Today, I'm joined by two, get that right, dose exceptional leaders. And these are leaders at the leading age Washington. We got Annie Zell. Now, she is the Vice President of Consulting and Member Services, and Laura Hofmann, Vice President of Clinical and Regulatory Services. Now, let me tell you about Annie. Annie brings more than 20 years of experience in senior living, including roles in skilled nursing as a facility administrator, assisted living administrator, area administrator, regional director of operations, chief operating officer, and now the VP of Consulting and Member Services. Her passion centers on building strong teams, developing systems that support quality care, and strengthening leadership collaboration across organizations. Now, my second powerhouse, Lori. Let me tell you, she brings over 23 years of experience in continuing care and 23 years of experience in retirement communities. She began her career as an LPN, like myself, and then became a registered nurse and served 13 years as a director of nursing, earning her MSN in leadership and management. When I say it's a powerhouse, let me tell you, she has spent the last 9.5 years with Leading Age of Washington. Her work focuses on clinical excellence, regulatory strategy, and supporting providers navigating complex survey and operational challenges. Listen, together, Annie and Lori join this conversation to discuss leadership in long-term care, the relationship between the director of nursing and administrator, community strategies, communication strategies, managing survey preparedness, and importing of addressing aging services from both the resident and the staff's perspective. This discussion is real world. It's about real world leadership, change makers in the field, and about practical strategies to improve your strength, your organization's strength in a demanding regulatory environment. So join me as we explore leadership, collaborations, and systems that need to be built, as they talk about supporting caregivers and the people that we serve. This is a conversation focused on strengthening long-term care. This is Sound Leadership with DJ. Welcome, Annie and Lori. How are you ladies doing today?
Great, thank you. So happy to be here with you.
Absolutely.
Yes, I am excited to be here. That was a mouthful. I mean, I got two dynamic powerhouses here. Like, wow. I'm reading these bios, and my team. Shout out to Amy who edits the podcast. She does the bios for me. Sometimes I get to read. Sometimes I read the bios before. Sometimes I don't. And when I was reading your guys' bios, I was like, wow. The knowledge that's going to be spilled on this episode is amazing. So, I'm going to dive right in. Lori, tell us who you are. This is how I started, right? I usually have one person say, introduce yourself. But, Lori, go first. Tell us who you really are, because I introduced you, but that was just a hot second. I know. Tell us who you really are.
Who am I really? I am the recovery director of nursing. How's that?
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I grew up in long-term care. Actually, I started as a nursing assistant, and then I went back to school and got my nursing degree, and never left long-term care. I was going to become a state surveyor, but I fell in love with long-term care and never left.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. We're gonna have to talk about that. So you've been in long-term care your whole career?
I have.
Wow. I love it. I love
Yep.
it. And Annie, what about yourself?
It's actually sort of similar. I often say Laura and I are two sides of the same coin. So I have been in long-term care for over 20 years. We'll leave it at that. I actually got into it in college, and I'm one of those crazy people who actually do what they went to college to do. And fell in love with long-term care as a 19-year-old heading off to college, and have worked in all different parts of it, doing all kinds of working with incredible teams, doing incredible things. So I feel really lucky that I found it at such a young age.
You know, what's interesting is you have three people on the call, obviously the three of us, myself included. I started off in long-term care at the age of 18. I became a CNA. My first job was a direct care worker, technically. The title was a direct care worker, and I have never really worked anything else. Of course, as a nurse, right? I'm sure you guys have moonlight all over the place to get your feet wet, but I don't know. What is it about long-term care that keeps people in it? What, from your guys' perspective, what are your thoughts? What keeps us here?
From a operations perspective, I'm not a nurse. Sometimes I play one on TV, right?
Yep.
But no, I am not a nurse. I am from the operations lens and the business side of things. And I think it's because it is so dynamic. There are so many different parts to long-term care. So even though I've had a long career in long-term care, I have had a different role and a different job. I've worked in so many different locations, so many different communities, and you gain something different in every single one. And so I think what keeps it interesting, why you might have an interest in helping others. I think that's a universal, why you might come into it, or you've had a really wonderful experience with, a senior in your life somehow. But I think what keeps us interested is it's always changing. It's always dynamic. There's so many different parts of it. And so I know for me, and, probably you all as well, is the chance to have so many different careers under one umbrella. And that's really exciting. It's really fun.
That's right.
I agree, Laura. Is that the same for you? It's kind of what keeps you coming back, and when to say you fell in love with it like I did at a young young age. It's been an amazing. But what keeps you coming back?
The residents. Absolutely, it's the residents. And I don't work with residents anymore, but I want the staff that is working with residents to be the best that they can be.
And I think that that's what makes when we talk about leadership, right? I want a leader who is passionate about the field. I want a leader who's here because they want to be here. I want a leader who gets up out of bed every day and say, how can I make these residents' lives better? And to me, that's what makes, a leader that I want to serve under. And the name of this podcast is Sound Leadership with DJ. So, of course, we focus on that leadership role. So, and Lori, how did you get into leadership, right? Because right now you hold that fancy title of clinical. What's the title? It's a little cut off on the screen for me, but what is your technical title? VP of?
VP of Clinical and Regulatory Services.
How do we
all things clinical and regulatory.
I
don't do money.
So, what was your first brush with leadership?
My first brush, the night I passed my NCLEX, they put me on night shift as the charge nurse.
Isn't that always the case?
Very first day I was an RN, I got put on night shift as the RN manager. Yeah.
We're gonna have to talk about that. That's always the case. But they throw a flashlight at you, give you a whistle, and say you're a charge nurse.
That's
now
right.
Lead CNAs and now lead licensed practical nurse if you're an RN, lead licensed practical nurse if you're LPN. Then they're telling you to lead the CNAs, but there's really no formal training given to charge nurses sometimes or leaders sometimes, and I find that to be very interesting. Annie, what was your brush like with leadership?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's interesting. So I was recruited at a college for an administrator and training program by a very large for-profit back in the day, and so you kind of sign your life away and say, I'm game. And I said, I'll move anywhere in the United States as long as I'm within 30 minutes of an airport. And that was my one requirement. So fresh out of college, I went and did an AIT program, and it was a wonderful experience to really, I had volunteered, I had worked a little bit, but to really be behind the scenes and have a very formalized program was really great. And then I actually held the record for the youngest nursing home administrator in the state of Massachusetts for, I'm sure it's broken by now. And so I think I was 23 when I was licensed and ran my first nursing home. Yeah, it was a learning curve of a lifetime. But it was a wonderful opportunity to really figure out who I was and what kind of leader I wanted to be very, very quickly. And it was the start of a great adventure.
So being an administrator, running a multi-million-dollar organization had to be stressful at 23. What were some of the things that you've done at 23, young 23-year-old Annie, that you're like, now I got experience and I don't know that I would be leading that direction? Because we all make blenders. Even now, I can be the best leader in the world, and we all can make some not the best decisions, or but so think about 23-year-old Annie. What was that like, and what would you tell that 23-year-old Annie to as from a leadership, knowing what you know about leadership now?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I think one of the great parts was I had the energy, right? I was so excited.
Oh, yes.
I was so excited to be
Hungry.
there. Yes, and so excited about the work we were doing, and it was a tough building. It was not. They don't hand out the gems of the organization to the newbies, so it was a really tough building. No one could make that building work, and I was determined. I said, I can do it. I will make this happen. And I think slowing down and really thinking things through and not just rushing to a decision. I think really understanding and valuing the opinions of more senior and more experienced people on your team. And I think at 23, you hear it, but you don't necessarily hear it. And understand the value and the power of that to accomplish the goals, where you want to go and what you're trying to get the team to do. And I think the last thing that I would tell myself is to just really be more strategic about how you want to get to where you want to go. If the goal is to improve census, how are you going to get that whole team behind you to build and invest and have that buy-in? I think when you're that young, you think, well, of course, if I set the goal and I say this is important, everyone's just going to jump on board and say, let's do it. And I think, as we learn and grow and understand that it's much more than that. And you have to put the time in to get to know your team, to get to know the staff, to get to know what's important to them, and to really understand, okay, we can do this together, but you have to kind of pull all those pieces together in maybe a little bit different way. And I think as you gain more experience, you understand how important that is to do first before you're jumping towards that big goal.
And Lori, I'm sure, you have something similar, because, when you graduated and passed that NCLEX, they just threw you the keys and say you're a charge nurse. So, as you climbed up, you mentioned you was a director of nursing. What was that like, entering into your first director of nursing role? And, I know when I became one, I finally felt like I made it, but boy, was I wrong.
Right? So most directors of nursing do not apply for the job because they want it. They are the next in line, right? So the next nurse with the highest seniority becomes the director of nursing. And that's what happened with me. I walked into it thinking that I could do that, as well as MDSs and care plans and a resident care coordinator all at the same time, because they decided not to backfill. So Yeah, it was crazy. And the one thing I learned the fastest is that you have to start separating your friends from your employees, right?
Yeah.
You can't still be friends with everybody and be their supervisor. And I think that was the hardest lesson for me was
Agree.
was becoming a supervisor, because they don't teach you that in nursing school. They don't teach you how to be a supervisor. They don't teach you about HR issues. They don't teach you about family and how to deal with families. And so that was the hardest one for me, was learning to be a supervisor.
And I want to speak from having done everything, right? Like you ladies, right? And as I said, I started off as a CNA. I got my LPN, I got my RN, and now you're RN. Now, and stop me when I'm wrong, Lori. Let me cook for a minute, but stop me when I'm wrong. You get that RN, they say, well, you're primed for a unit manager role. You are next in line for a unit manager role. Maybe you could be a Don, right? Then you get your BSc in, then you're definitely issuing for the DON role. And now we want you to do that. You can maybe do some regional roles. You get a master's, right? They kind of elevate you up. And then I'll speak to getting a doctorate. But where I think or the schools are going wrong is, to your point, we tell these people as you get additional degrees, you're primed for these leadership roles, but we didn't give you leadership training. We didn't make you take an accounting class. We didn't make you take a financial class. So how are you supposed to move an organization forward and align with the goals and the vision of the organizations if you didn't take any basic leadership classes, true leadership classes, or any kind of classes that align with financial or accounting, which frankly, Annie, I know you've been some COO roles. I feel like those are some of the key things they need to know is finances and true leadership. What's your thoughts?
I think it's a real challenge. And I think that's where organizations like Leading Age Washington and the associations, and there are many out there, professional organizations that support these type of leadership roles, that they become more and more important just to simply have a space for that. It's funny, Laura and I were having this conversation just the other day about, you have a new leadership position on your team, like a director of nursing, for example, to your point of they've been promoted because they were good at tasks. They were great at documentation and med pass and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But as a director of nursing, you still need to have that knowledge. You need to know all of that. But what you actually spend your time on that's only maybe 20%. 80% of your time is on people, systems, HR issues, family issues, those kind of things. And, developing those skills aren't always natural. There are some people who are just better at it and have a natural, connection with people or staff or something like that. But for everyone, the entire skill set, there's always something that people need to work on and develop. And I think, for young professionals, getting involved in those professional associations is so valuable to get those resources, to those classes, those webinars, those opportunities to learn those skills, and developing mentor relationships and professional networks and all of those things that we later on realize, whether we knew it or not, we had the benefit of those things happen and helped us along the way.
I appreciate that, right? Because as we're talking about leaderships and leaders getting into the post acute care space, right? Sometimes they're next in line, and I think that what happens is when we hire from that directive, where they're just next in line, or somebody we know, but they may not be the best candidate, we're going to start to see gaps in their leadership. So, what leadership gaps are you guys seeing most in the post acute care space right now? What does that look like from your guys' purview?
I think there's a combination. I think there's still the traditional DNS administrator, executive director, those roles, I think there's leadership gaps in those roles. Not so much. I think there are great people that are excited and part of that, but they're missing those pieces that we, have been mentioning. Those, we might call them soft skills, how to have difficult conversations, how to do disciplinary action, how to motivate folks, how to get people aligned with the vision of where you want to go. I think those are still, that's still an area. And I think the other piece that's newer, or as I've, kind of noticed, I think more recently, is getting people excited about leadership roles in the future, or that taking that very first step into leadership, going from being part of the team to a department manager or a shift manager or a unit manager, or that very first step and saying yes to that. I think there's opportunities. There's so many opportunities for people to do that, but it's about saying yes and stepping up when the opportunity presents itself. And I think the more that we can develop people, that they can understand that they do have the ability to do it. They can do it. It is just simply a skill set that they can work on and develop. And so especially for those new and emerging leaders, encouraging them to participate and say yes, and then giving them the tools to be successful. I think that's an area that we certainly need to, grow our future and grow future leaders. That's an area that I think we definitely need to focus on.
Absolutely. 100%. I agree, Annie, with everything you said. If you're going to put somebody in that leadership role, give them the tools to be successful. Do not set them up for failure. Yeah. I agree.
And one of the tools I think that are out there that organizations could have access to is something like your organization, right? Because you guys host webinars, you host trainings, you have a conference coming up. Why should organizations join you guys or another large organization that does something, in a similar space? What are the benefits of joining someone who, is dedicated to the post-acute care space? What does that look like for them?
You want to go, Laura?
Go ahead.
There are so many benefits. I think anybody who has been in this business, or really any profession, we're not alone. Almost every profession out there has a professional association associated with it. The American Medical Association, American Psychology Association. You think of these things, almost every profession has that association, just like long-term care. So for, nonprofit long-term care companies, Leading Age is that, professional organization. And I think we could talk your entire podcast about it, but I think especially for someone new to the field or just getting started, the main benefits are, one, you're not alone. I think anyone who has sat behind a desk and said, oh my gosh, I now have this title, I'm not sure how I got here, what am I doing? To be able to pick the phone up and call someone and say, hey, that isn't your boss, that isn't, someone within your organization, and say, I'm thinking about this. Does this make sense? And have that person on the other side of the phone have that experience, have been through probably what you're going through, or if they don't, then to connect you with somebody who does have that experience or maybe has that knowledge. That is so powerful. It makes you feel like you can do it. It builds that confidence that, I had it right. I can do it. I think that is huge. I think too, continue developing those leadership skills. Most professional organizations like ours, we have a leadership institute. So you can go and develop these very particular leadership skills in a safe environment that you really can learn well and grow, and not feel like you're doing it with 1,000 people staring at you, and being in a safe space. So I think the opportunity to grow and develop those leadership skills is huge. And then the third piece, especially for young professionals, is developing a network. There are very few people that understand how challenging it is to work in the long-term care environment. Unless you have worked in it or utilized it or have been adjacent to it in some way, you just don't understand the complexity that our leaders are faced with. And so sometimes you just need to be able to talk to somebody who also understands. You don't have to explain it first to talk about the frustration or how you're trying to problem solve something. You can just have the conversation, and that is so valuable. And I can tell you, we've been through it as an industry. COVID was a true test for all of us, and I can tell you, the days that I called up Laura and had conversations, and I'm not going to get emotional about it, but when you're in a dark day and you need to talk to somebody else who really understands what you're going through, and she got me through some of those tough days, and I did that for some of my colleagues, and they did it back for me. And it's, sometimes it's celebrations, but oftentimes it's when you're having a really bad day and you need to talk to someone who understands, has been through it, is going through it with you, or just went through it 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And it's hard. It's hard as a professional when you're busy working, taking care of family, running around. It's tough to find the time to do all of that. And so by joining a professional organization, you really get the benefit of getting to meet other people. And so there are, conferences, there's trainings, there are educations, and you start to meet people and you're like, oh, I like their take on that. I'm going to go hang out with them for a little bit. Or, oh, hey, let's go, we're going to grab a coffee over there. And you start to meet people you click with, you develop those relationships, and they really do get you through in some of the hardest moments. And I think, we can talk about all the benefits of, what's on the brochure of, classes and, all the things. But I think really if I was a young professional getting started and really understanding, why do I go ask my boss for this money to go do this thing? It is those reasons. So for me, that really is what not only helped me, but why I would continue to be part of it and want to be part of an organization like this.
Yeah,
I like it.
I think connections, it's all about connections. And COVID was a very hard time. It was a very hard time. And Annie was one of the first people I spoke to on that Saturday because she was adjacent to the building that was the first outbreak. And, I think we all have kind of moved past COVID, but we will never forget it. And one of my favorite memories, if you have to have a favorite memory of COVID, is we had started Friday phone calls with updates because the guidance was coming out so fast and so furiously, we couldn't keep up. So I started a Friday phone call so that they could all get the same information at the same time. And we were all on Zoom. We were all new to Zoom. Nobody wanted their cameras on. And on this one Friday phone call, I said, I want you guys to all turn your cameras on because we hadn't seen each other for 3 months. And I said, I want you to turn your cameras on and let's see who's out there supporting you. And everybody turned their cameras on.
Wow.
And everybody started crying. And I said, this is your support network. This is your support group. And people were just bawling. And we had Northwest Healthcare Response Network on there, which is our healthcare coalition here in Washington. And they said, we have never seen anything so powerful as the power of connection on that call. It was amazing. And we have amazing members.
We do. And just to know you're not alone. It is, you can feel like you're in this little bubble, this little island of your building, your community, even if you're part of a larger organization, as the leadership, it's usually the administrator and the DNS sitting there trying to figure it out. And it can feel overwhelming at times. And to know that you're part of something bigger, you're part of something that will be there for you when it's good stuff and when it's not. It's a powerful thing. And I think, it's that's really the power of it.
Yep.
Perfect. I think this is a great opportunity to pause us here and thank our sponsors. Hey, did you hit that like button yet? That subscribe button yet? Well, if you didn't hit it, that's how I get views. I need the views. Sound Leadership with DJ invites you to like and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. If you haven't, hit that bell, hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified of every single episode that we host here on Sound Leadership with DJ. Have you done it yet? All right, now back to this episode. Sound Leadership with DJ would be nothing without our sponsors. First, we'd like to thank SMK Medical, the healthcare consultant company of choice, Survey Guard, the compliance platform for the post-acute care space, and Jim Healthcare Consulting. So Welcome back, ladies. I appreciate you guys for taking time out of your day. It is midday here in Hawaii for me, 70 degrees, a great 70 degrees. I know it is a little cold up there in Washington, so I appreciate you for just spending some time with me and talking about leadership. And we just got through talking about COVID and how that impacted our industry, and how, Laura, you talked about having people turn on their cameras, and to me that was a great show of leadership. I want to start to dive in deep. I really want to get into the meat and potatoes. I want to talk about some issues, some trends that we're finding in our space. And it's no secret our space is suffering from a workforce shortage. So, how do we as leaders combat this workforce shortage? What can we do? What strategies can we do? Not just things that sound good, right? Everybody's, there's a lot of things out there that sound good, but what can we actually do to recruit new talent? We all talked about how we got into this at a young age. Very rare. Most people are not, right? And if I can be frank, some people get into post acute care because it's a fallback job, right? They didn't get to where they wanted to go, so they come here. But how do we position this so it's not a fallback job? It is the job of choice for healthcare workers. What does that look like from you two?
I think the most important thing is to grow your own. You have fabulous staff in every department, and you need to grow your own. The I had so many staff members that worked in housekeeping and dietary and laundry and the business office, and they were fabulous people. And I said, you know what? You would make a really great nurse. You would make a really great nursing assistant. Grow your own. Support them and help get them, invest in them, and get them to where they need to be. There's some fabulous people that work in long-term care, and they just need the help to get there.
Is that anything else from you, Annie? Once
Yeah,
again,
I
I think it's
absolutely
great
agree.
to grow your
Yeah.
own, but how do we get them even to apply so you can be that housekeeper so I can grow my own? How do you make it appealing? Because I'm gonna be frank, when I was growing up, I know I was different age, right? Nursing home is just where Granny went. I didn't go in there. There were smells. It wasn't appealing. So how do we really say, okay, this is the first choice that I want to apply to?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with what Laura's saying. It's a pathway, an opportunity, and breaking down barriers. There's so many people that don't necessarily have the opportunity right off the bat, right? They're, for lots of reasons. And so I think creating those pathways, that there is nothing like nursing to create a pathway to a career. I mean, you can literally start with zero education and become a master's level nurse. That is a real path. You can start as, an NAR and NAC, LPN, RN, BSN. You can, there is real pathway for that. And I think it's then also creating those opportunities, not just in the clinical world, but the other areas as well, so making it attractive to younger professionals looking to come in, and also our support staff teams, which means being present, creating roles that, that allow people to do multiple things. So what I mean by that is non-traditional schedules for non-clinical roles, for example, like, housekeeping. There was a program I worked on years ago where we had a team of housekeepers that worked at night so they could go to school during the day. And it allowed them to, get various degrees, GED to associate's degrees, which then allowed them to then, go on to higher level degrees and, continue to grow that opportunity. So thinking about, is there a way to do things differently than what we're doing now? Sometimes, we have some very rigid regulatory requirements, and the answer is no. But that's why there's opportunities in little ways that we can create different opportunities. And if we create them, then it allows people to come to us that might not normally do that, because they can have both. They can go to school and they can work, which is often what they need. So I think that's one piece. I think two, creating the opportunity to get out there and talk about long-term care in a different way. So when we talk about, kids in college, getting started, trying to figure out what that first job looks like, what they want to do with this. They spend all this time in school. Okay, what are we really going to do with it? Long-term care has opportunities that other fields just don't. There's that common phrase of, I don't get hired because I don't have experience, but if no one hires me, how am I going to get the experience? And one of the really cool things about, long-term care is if you say, hey, I'm willing to give it a try, there's opportunity. And I think that's an incredible gift, especially as a young professional, to go in and learn those HR skills, leadership skills, all those things that you need and can apply to any part of healthcare, whether this is you become a long-termer, like the three of us, or if this is just a piece of your journey, it's beneficial for our whole world. And I think, getting out and speaking to younger folks about that this is an opportunity. When we're little kids, what do we hear about? You can be a teacher, a fireman, nurse, the jobs that we see, as kids. We don't talk about, nursing home administrators. There's not one I knew about as a kid. Certainly
I
not
didn't even
something
know about that growing up.
In high school would have told me about. I think there are many jobs like that we don't even know as young professionals, especially if you're growing up in, rural areas, or, really doesn't even matter. You just don't get exposed to those things unless you have a treasured grandparent that you're visiting every weekend and you get exposed to that world. You just don't know. So I think one of the things that has worked really well is intergenerational programming. So connecting seniors and kids and students all together. We're seeing more of that, like, having college kids live in retirement communities that are close to universities, getting exposed to that world. I think, we're seeing more guest lecturers coming in from the long-term space to talk in business schools and into clinical programs to talk about the, operational side of things. So I think we're doing some of that, but we just need more of it, more and more and more of it. And that takes time from everybody that loves this industry and wants to see it grow and develop. And also organization. It takes somebody to say, hey, let's put together, a scholarship program, or let's put together something that helps people access the industry.
I agree with that. I think that we need to be innovative in the way that we move people into this space. But I think innovation starts with bold leaders. And I think bold leadership starts at the top. I think that's where culture starts, right? So when we talk about bold leadership, we talk about innovation, we talk about leaders, it all rises and falls with the administrator and the DON. So Lori, being a director of nursing, how important is that administrator DON relationship, and what does a healthy relationship look like?
Oh my gosh. I was blessed to have one of the best administrators. I could go in his office and just sit in the chair and say nothing, and he would just keep working and let me be there and decompress. That is the most important relationship, because everything sits on your shoulders, the two of them. And so, Annie and I both, one of my first administrators was a good friend of Annie's who sat on the nursing home administrator board with her. And I'll never forget, he's the one that put me in he's the one that put me in a resident care manager role. And he was the first one to write me up for not taking my lunch. And I was devastated.
Okay.
I didn't take a lunch, and he wrote me up for it, and I refused to sign it. But as a nurse on the floor, I didn't understand the importance of it. And then when you become a director of nursing, you understand that. And the administrator is there with the director of nursing. It is like, talk about work spouse. They are work spouse, right, Annie?
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah,
100%.
Yeah. So you have to have a good relationship with your administrator. That it runs the building.
Mm-hmm. And I think that relationship it truly is a marriage, a partnership, a marriage, whatever you want to use in that. It is one of the most important relationships. And, when it works, there's nothing your team can't do. And if it doesn't work, everybody knows. And it is nothing great's going to come from that. And I think just like anything, any relationship, it takes time and investment. And I think sitting down and really getting to know your partner, what's important to them, what they value, what their priorities are, sharing the same, your views of that, and then talking through setting expectations with each other, and some of that you learn about each other over time, but also sometimes you have to just verbalize it. If it's not clear, the expectation, how do you connect on it? And I think just being very realistic of, I know you're not going to like this, but this is why we have to do it. This is what's happening. This is this is the reason. Giving people time to process that, and then come to get back together and talk it through, and then really strategizing, okay, how do we get our team on board? How do we do this? And then whatever happens behind those closed doors, you're a united front when you leave that office. You have to be. It is a sacred relationship. And if you're not supporting each other in that, it is so easy for that to fall apart. And so I think it's one of the most important relationships to spend time on. And it's very easy to not. It's very easy that you get so busy in the day-to-day. It is so easy to just not see each other. And most of the time, they're not necessarily in the same area. Those offices are wherever they happen to be. And you have to make a real effort to make that connection every single day. And it can be 5 minutes, it can be an hour, whatever, you need it to be. But it's one of those relationships that if you can't make work, you have to recognize it and you have to change, because without that united front, without that true partnership, you can't move your building forward. So I think that is one of the bedrock foundations of building a excellent operation, is you have to have that partnership be bulletproof.
I like that. And so, relationships take time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And I think that as leaders, we have to be mindful of that. What I've seen when new leaders go into buildings is they immediately go in and start changing a lot of things instead of assessing the situation, right? They're not taking their time before they impart that change. So, what advice would you give the new leaders who are taking over an organization at a director level, at a managerial level, from a supervisor? What advice would you give one of the new leaders that are coming in so they can be successful in their role? What would you say to them?
Listen to the staff. Listen to those that have been there and that have the historical knowledge, and be available.
That.
And I also think it takes longer than you think. Yes. Sometimes you can go in and you feel like you are listening. I heard that story. I heard this thing. And just because they've said it once doesn't mean that they really understand that you really have heard them. And I think, often there is a lot of expectations coming into that change or coming into the role, and understanding that it's going to take more time than you think it is. And understand, and if it's not, shifting, right? Sometimes you think, okay, I'm doing the things that have worked in the past, and if you're not, seeing that, shifting gears and saying it's okay to do something different. It's okay to try a different approach. It's okay to, mix it up. That's okay. I think, as long as your team is feeling heard, they're feeling seen, they're feeling that you are investing in that relationship that you have on whatever scale that is, it will make a big difference in the long
run. What's interesting is, I do a lot of speaking, right? And with Leading Age, particularly, right? And the theme this year was change makers, right? And, as I was preparing for this interview and doing some research, right, I stumbled upon your page, right? And one of the things I'm going to show it here on the screen, right? One of the things, right? Together we shape the future of aging. The key word is together. Nobody's in this alone, right? We are doing this together. If we want to be an effective change maker, we need to do this together. And I love the theme this year. In fact, like I said, I spoke 3-4 different leading ages. In fact, so to speak with your guys', I was at another event, but I really resonate this year with the theme of the conference. So shout out to, main leading age however this comes down, right? Shout out to whoever, because this, to me, I'm a change maker. I'm a thought partner. I'm a leader in the space. But most importantly, I do it together. It's never just my vision, right? It's a team's vision. So talk to us about this conference that you guys are having June 1st through the 3rd, 2026 there in Washington. Tell us all about it, and why should we be there? Why should change makers be in that room?
It is so exciting. Both Laura and I are really excited about this year. We're in a new location. It gets moved around the state. So if there's anyone listening that hasn't been to a conference like this before, we represent a very large state, right? Washington State's a big place. And so it moves around. And the hope is that by moving it to different parts of the state, that different people can come and join that maybe otherwise wouldn't if it was too far away or too much travel. And so we're in Wenatchee this year, which is super exciting. It is an opportunity for all of those things that we have been talking about today: connection, networking, learning, growing, being in a safe space to ask questions. It's all of those things. So we are super excited to go out to Wenatchee. We have some really great sessions. I'd love Laura to talk a little bit about we have a really interesting DNS class that's going to talk about, really, it's in design for new DNSs coming into that role, or looking to the future to come into that role. So that's a really interesting class. And we also have a really fascinating one on behavioral health that affects all parts of the organization, from occupancy and admission and managing those behaviors, especially in our life plan communities. How do we do that? We have some really fantastic speakers coming, and we have some really wonderful keynote speakers coming as well, that really talk about leadership and how to find the passion for it. If you've been in it a long time, how do you keep going, especially when we have challenges and we keep getting, faced with hurdles? How do you come back again and again and get your teams excited about it and create that, excitement around it? So it's a great opportunity to do all the things we've been talking about and more, and to get to know, if you've never been to one before, just to start to get to know the other people who value this work, are passionate about it, are excited about it. It's a wonderful opportunity. And so Laura, if you want to talk a little bit about the DNS class, I think that is one of the highlights of the classes for this conference. It's really cool.
Yeah, so we've got we have 3 fabulous DNSs that have been doing it and have been through it and know what new DNS is expected to know. And I think mentoring the next generation is one of the most important things we can do. And so we have these experienced DNSs that are going to talk to new DNSs about how do you set up a system, how do you get ready for survey, how do you deal with HR issues. And so it's just, and there's not going to be a script. It's just going to be a conversation, and networking and mentoring and growing the next generation of directors of nursing and nurse managers. It's going to be a great session.
That's going to be fire. So how do they register? How do they learn more?
Go to the website. Yeah, the Leading Age Washington website, and it's registration is open. So come see us. Come network.
Okay. I think that's what it is, right? This is a great place for people to network. This is a great place for people to connect with like-minded people. If you're curious about entering the long-term post-acute care space, this is an event that you want to be. I am saddened that I won't be there this year, but I promise next year I will be there. I will pencil you in. I want to speak. I think your person reached out to me to do a pre-con or something. It was something on leadership. It was a flyer with 3 of our faces on it. I definitely want to come back and speak. I want to be there. I want to be, any place that we're talking about, exceptional leadership in the post-acute care space. So I appreciate you ladies for joining me as we depart. Annie, share one final thing to our listeners. You have somebody who is right now listening to this podcast, and they are on a fence. Their administrator just came to them and said, "We want you to step into leadership." The regional just came to them and said, "You're a great administrator. I want you to be a regional now, right? I want you to move. I want you to move on up, right? Maybe that CNA is going to go back and become an LPN. That housekeeper is now stepping into the director role, but they're nervous. They're scared. They don't know what to do. What are you going to say to them, Manny?"
Say yes. Say yes. What's the worst that can happen? Okay, it doesn't work out. It doesn't, it isn't the right thing for you, but you're going to learn that. And what an incredible gift as you're learning in your career and you're growing in your career. Change happens by those that show up. So if you show up and you say yes when there's the opportunity to say yes, you have no idea where that path is going to go. And it might take you in a completely different direction. It might continue to grow, but it is going to open your life. It's going to open doors, and it's going to help you to become, the better version of yourself. You just continue to keep growing and trying, and there's going to be mistakes and there's going to be stumbles, but you just keep saying yes. And it's an incredible opportunity. And anytime you can say yes, give it a shot. What do you have to lose? I think sometimes we get fearful and we get comfortable in where we are or what we've tried. And the opportunity appears, say yes, give it a shot. You have nothing to lose.
I love it. And Laura, close us out, right? You got that DO. No, you got that DON who's like, I'm about to throw the keys. Like, I'm ready to just walk away. This isn't for me. I don't feel like I'm making an impact, because we all have been there, right? You go in you go in your office, you close the door, and you just cry. What are you saying to that DON who's like, this isn't for me? This is hard. I'm not moving the needle forward. How do you talk to him?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one. What do I say to a DNS that's ready to walk? Go home, take a hot bath, and remember that the residents need you. The residents, that's why we're all here. That's why we're here, is for the residents. And you know what? We have, in long-term care, we have the very unique opportunity to be the very last person these residents see on earth, and run with it.
I love it. I appreciate you ladies for coming on. Hit us with the website one more time.
It is Leading Age Washington, or leadingage.wa.org. So if you just put in your search engine, Leading Age Washington, it will pop up, or leadingagwa.org. You'll find us all there. And we can't wait to see everyone in June.
Hey, that's what it is. That's what it is. So, first off, I appreciate you ladies for joining me once again. You took time out of your day, and you did not have to take time out of your day to meet with me. So I really am excited for that. Thank you to our sponsors, SMK Medical, Gym Healthcare Consultant, and Survey Guard, for, of course, allowing us to have this platform to be able to put this on. And thank you to the listeners. Thank you to the viewers, right? As we embark on this leadership journey, I want you to know that you are not alone, right? I thank you for embarking on this leadership journey with me here at Sound Leadership with DJ. Today's episode has been filled with just insights, inspiration, and wisdom from Annie and Laura. And if this conversation sparked a new ideal, inspired action, or simply left you wanting more, we invite you to follow us on all social media platforms. Simply search Sound Leadership with DJ and hit that subscribe button. As we part today, remember, leadership is a journey. It's not a destination. Keep striving to learn and grow and never give up on your goals. We're honored to be a part of your leadership journey and anticipate welcoming you back to more enriching insights and conversations in transformational leaderships here on Sound Leadership with DJ. Until next time, keep leading, keep growing, and remember that within Sound Leadership, you're in good company.
Thanks for tuning into Sound Leadership with DJ. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, Share your favorite takeaways with a friend or colleague. Leave a review and let us know what you think. And remember, leadership is not just a title, it's a choice. Choose to lead with purpose, passion, and impact. See you on the next episode.